I'm Charley Peters and I'm an artist based in London. This is my studio in South Bermondsey and I've been working here for about 4 to 5 years. The paintings that I make really try to explore what a contemporary language of abstraction could be. I'm really interested in the legacy of high modernism, so I often use types of painting that might be familiar from the past, such as abstract expressionism, the hard edge, pop art. I make quite knowing references to these types of existing painting. But I also mix these references up with shapes, colours, forms that might be strangely familiar from everyday life, from our current visual culture. Things that might be familiar from looking at computer screens, from browsing the internet, from playing video games or watching TV. One of my favourite things about working in this studio is that I have a really big window at the end of the room, which gives me enough natural light for me to be able to see colour really clearly. Colour's a really important part of what I do, and so being able to work without having an artificial light on throughout the day really makes a difference to my experience of being here. I also love the view from my window. I'm very lucky to be overlooking a kind of exciting little slice of South Bermondsey landscape. It's quite an urban environment, but I'm always inspired by lots of noise, lots of activity, lots of stuff to see. I've always lived and worked in cities, so this is a really great place for me to be. I feel like I'm very much in the heart of what's going on in South Bermondsey. I can see trains going past the window. There's a mechanics yard outside where there's always like building and drilling and things being taken apart and reconstructed. It's a really exciting, lively place to be working, and all that energy really feeds into the work that I make in the studio. I have loads of sketchbooks in the studio. I don't ever use them to do drawings for paintings that I'm then going to subsequently make. That's not really their purpose. They serve a lot of different purposes, actually. I mean, in the first instance, they're a place for me just to put random thoughts that I don't quite understand yet, which might just look like scribbles to most people, but at some point they've been translated from kind of half-formed thoughts in my head into something that might then turn into me understanding how different shapes might relate to each other if I were to put them into a painting. They are very important things in my studio, and I look through my sketchbooks a lot. I also have other sketchbooks that have more finished drawings in them, so they're quite separate from the paintings, because I think my paintings come from colour and from the act of painting. Then the drawings are something quite separate. They feel very different. When my work doesn't have colour, it still feels like my work, but it's definitely doing something quite different to that. And then I also have some sketchbooks that are more like little collages that I make, and they help me to understand maybe how different shapes or forms or volumes of paint might work together if I was then to put them onto a canvas. But again, they never turn into actual paintings. These things, I never make something that is small in a sketchbook and then rescale it and make it big. I don't think I'd be able to do that. These things are made so quickly and without much thought that they exist in their own world, really. The paintings are different, they take longer, and they develop over longer periods of time with different types of thinking. The things in sketchbooks are much more immediate, and they come out of a place that really is like pure intuition. So in the studio today, I've got several paintings that are in various stages of completion. There are several that are finished, so they're out ready to be wrapped and sent out of the studio. I've also got some that have a few layers of paint on them already, some kind of intuitive early marks that I need to work out what I'm going to do with next. And I have another canvas that has just a layer of colour on it. As the process of making my paintings progress, I move through different stages of applying paint. Firstly, in a gestural way that is very free, where I really let the paint move across the canvas in its own way. Then I look at the shapes that the paint has created, and that's where I start to maybe apply more precise decision making to what I'm doing. I'll look at what shapes are there, what kind of spatial areas have been created by the more fluid application of paint. And that's when I will start to do work on them that is maybe a little bit more laborious and time consuming, where I might be very precisely cutting bits of masking tape to make much more well articulated shapes that might fit in or around the more intuitively applied marks that are already on the canvas. So once I've got an initial layer of colour on the canvas, I then start varying the tone or the colour across the surface of the painting. And I do that with either pre-mixed acrylic paint in a spray can, or I mix my own colour, which I then apply with a spray gun or an airbrush. I use a different range of ways of applying paint to the canvas. So to get a nice flat layer of colour on the first layer, I usually apply the paint with a roller. Then I will spray colour because it gives you a really great sort of gradient or blend of colours that looks quite dewy and soft across the canvas. I really love the sensibility of sprayed paint. I think it's really beautiful, and it provides a really good contrast to then the subsequent layers where I'm using a brush and acrylic, which has a much denser sensibility. I really love mixing up different types of painting within the same picture plane. I think it makes paintings really exciting and makes you stop and look much more closely at how the painting was constructed, which I think is really good today when we spend so much time zipping through images really quickly on Instagram and online. I think paintings really can hold your attention and make you look much more closely and really slow you down, which I think is super important today. I have lots of different brushes in the studio, lots of different shapes and sizes, because across different canvases I use lots of different painting techniques. So sometimes I need to be able to spread paint out very quickly, so I might use a big palette knife or a really big thick flat brush. But sometimes I do very precise and quite fiddly graphic little bits of painting, so I also have much smaller brushes to do that sort of stuff with as well. I don't think I keep my paints or my brushes in a very good order. I'm a bit embarrassed about how messy and disorganised they all are actually. I always think it might be better if I just laid my brushes out flat on the floor so I could see them all in one glance. But I actually quite like the excitement of rummaging around and maybe not finding the brush I'm looking for, but finding something else instead and seeing what marks I can get with that. And it's the same with my paints. You know, I think when I first moved into this studio, I tried to be really tidy and arrange my paints in order of colour. But of course, as soon as you start painting, they just get messed up and they're all over the floor, you know, and they're falling down the back of the cupboard. I'm not a very tidy person when I'm in here, and I'm quite clumsy. So I think I've just come to terms with the fact that my stuff will never be that organised. So one of the most important bits of kit that I have in the studio is my hairdryer. So more often than not, I will put a layer of paint on a canvas and then I'll give it a quick blast with my hairdryer, and that allows me then to carry on working much more quicker than I would be able to otherwise. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with my airbrush. I really enjoy the types of painting that I can do with it. It gives a really great effect on the canvas. I love sprayed paint anyway. It always looks really light and sort of almost like airy. But I hate using machines, and I'm really rubbish with any kind of technology. So I do find having an airbrush quite a difficult thing to manage sometimes. It gets clogged very easily. I have to remember to clean it out properly. Sometimes it just doesn't work and it takes me ages to work out why. But it's a really important part of my studio kit. As well as working on canvas in the studio, I also do work on larger commission projects like painting on walls in different locations. These can include things like obviously painting on walls in galleries, but also in places like hospitals, in corporate environments. And these type of projects really require me to provide the client with a proposal or a sketch of what the work is going to look like before I install it. It's a very different process to what I do in the studio, where I make paintings that come purely from a place within, where I don't need to plan what I'm going to do or show anybody what the painting's going to look like before I've done it. But when you're working on wall paintings that are very public, where a lot of people are going to see them, you have to really have a plan for how you're going to do it. So I have an area of the studio here, which is where I put little drawings or sketches or digital mock-ups of what the work is going to look like. And I keep them just up here just to remind me while I'm in the process of working on the project and maybe sourcing different types of paint or really finalising the ideas of how I'm going to make these things. So this is quite an important wall for me, and it's also a really good archive of projects that I have worked on. So I like to keep these things around me, really, just to remind me of some of the great opportunities that I've had to work in spaces outside of my studio. Thank you so much for visiting me in the studio today. I hope you've enjoyed your virtual tour. If you want to find out any more about my work or get in touch with any questions, then you can find more information on my website, which is charleypeters.com, and my email address is there too, so do please feel free to get in touch. It'd be lovely to hear from you.